Oh. All right. Hey, everyone. This is Leo here from Team World Vision. We have a very special guest with us today. And the reason why we have Nathalie Niddam on board is because in talking to a lot of folks who are training for a half or a full, they have a lot of questions around nutrition. What is the best approach? You know, they maybe want to lose some weight, but are finding that even though they're exercising a whole lot more than they used to, they're just not losing the weight. In some cases, they're actually gaining weight. So it's my pleasure, my privilege to introduce Nathalie Niddam, who is a holistic nutritionist that I've been working with for a couple of years now. And Nathalie, welcome.
Thanks,
Yeah, no, just is awesome for participating in this. I think the audience is going to get a lot of benefit out of it. Can you just help us understand a little bit about your background?
Sure. I'd be happy to. So I'm, as you mentioned, I'm a holistic nutritionist, and I've been doing this for a few years now and loving it. It's my second career, as people would say, and it's something that I really came to out of a personal, lifelong passion for food, exercise, science, and so now I work with all kinds of people, athletes being one sector, and people like you, and yeah, I have a private practice. I'm also the nutrition coach at Academy of Lions, which is a CrossFit gym downtown, which is where we first met. And I also work with an executive health clinic, and as of this September, I'm a certified health and performance coach through Bulletproof. So getting a little bit more into, you know, helping people change their behavior and get out of their own way, as it were. So kind of like the nutrition and performance coaching at the same time.
Fantastic. Yeah. Again, just thank you for your ability to join us. Obviously, your credentials are well proven. You know, there's a lot of talk in the fitness community and the diet community around the terms paleo and ketogenic, which is a relatively new one for me. Can you help us understand what they are and how they may be different from one another?
Yeah, so paleo diet has been around, definitely it's been kicking around, I don't know, probably 5, 10, maybe 10 years now. It's hard for me to think back when I first heard about the paleo diet. And the paleo diet really, in its purest form, is a whole food diet. So we're trying to eat foods at the closest possible point to their natural state. We're focusing on fresh vegetables, grass-fed beef, wild-caught fish, pastured chicken, pastured eggs, a little bit of fruit, a little bit or a lot of fruit, depending on the person and their personal health goals and their personal activity levels. And the things that are missing from this diet, you know, and actually, sorry, one more thing, and a focus on healthy fats. So healthy fats are definitely a part of the paleo diet. So it's a diet that's kind of reacting, I don't know why, but in a sense to this carb, low fat kind of schism that we seem to have been gotten stuck in ever since the 80s, really, is when low fat really took charge and really took us away from fresh, wholesome foods. So what's missing in the paleo diet, and I say missing in that it's not like we really need it, but what's excluded in the paleo diet in general is most dairy. So some people who follow a paleo diet might make allowances for raw dairy if they tolerate dairy, but we know that a lot of people have some form of dairy intolerance or other. So dairy, for the most part, is left out. All grains are out. Beans, legumes, out the door. So that's your chickpeas, your lentils, your black beans, all that stuff. So essentially, where you're getting your carbs from is from the vegetables. So anything that grows out of the ground, right? So root vegetables, that kind of stuff. Some people will make allowances for rice. So, you know, on any of these diets, you're going to get a continuum, right? So your pure paleo guy is only going to eat vegetables, only going to eat fruit, nuts and seeds to a degree as well. We can talk about why you might not want to eat too many nuts and seeds later in the podcast, in the interview if we have time. And really paying a lot of attention to the source of the proteins. The ketogenic diet, on the other side of this, is a diet, it focuses a lot on a particular metabolic state. which is ketogenesis, which is a state where the body is primarily burning fat for fuel. And so this diet, in order for the body to do this, you have to limit your carbs to, and it depends on the person how low you have to go, but for most people, it's going to be, their carb intake is going to be around 5%, maybe 10% of their daily intake of calories. Where the difference is going to be made up is in healthy fats. So anywhere from 50 to 80% of the caloric intake is going to come from fats, and then 20, 25%, you know, it's going to be a sliding scale there, but then you're going to be getting about 20, 25% of your calories from good quality proteins, and then the balance is going to be the carbs. So, but it's a tricky diet because depending on your particular tolerance to carbs, depending on your activity levels, some people may be able to tolerate more carbs without getting pulled out of a ketogenic state. And a ketogenic state, just to explain, is when the body, like I said, is burning fat for fuel. So instead of running off glucose, you're running off fat. And the cool thing, you know, we're going to get to with endurance athletes, one of the interesting things that people can look at is when you're running on fat for fuel instead of sugar, your body, no matter how lean you are, has virtually endless supplies of fat that it can access for fuel in a race where you're running at a very constant pace. And so it kind of gets people out of that world of having to replenish with glucose. But I think I'm getting ahead of myself. Did I explain the ketogenic diet enough?
No, it was fantastic. Thank you. Now, you mentioned fats, healthy fats. What are some examples of healthy and unhealthy fats?
Okay, so your best fats, I tend to encourage people to get more of their fats from things like avocados, olives, coconut oil, coconut milk. The eggs are great. Wild caught fish. Now, I'm not writing this down, so I may repeat myself. Some fat from grass-fed beef is going to be fantastic as well. Did I say avocado oil?
No, you didn't.
Okay. Avocados, avocado oil, coconuts, coconut oil, coconut milk. Like I said, the eggs, grass-fed beef. Chicken's a funny one because a lot of the fat in chicken is omega-6, and people have probably heard of omega-3s and omega-6s. An oversimplification of omega-3 to omega-6 is that omega-6 supports inflammatory pathways, whereas omega-3 supports anti-inflammatory pathways. You don't want no omega-6, but you want a balance between the two. And definitely in the North American diet, we tend to be way overrepresented on the omega-6s. So that causes a lot of inflammation in the body and a lot of other metabolic problems that we're seeing. The bad fats, okay, the fats you want to stay away from are going to be things like any deep fried food, right? So that fat is going to be any fat that's been heated over and over and over again is going to be oxidized and it's going to be harmful to the body. Typically, we stay away from vegetable oils. So corn oil, canola oil, safflower oil, all of these oils, mostly because they've been processed to a point where they've been damaged and they've had to be deodorized. And actually, I forgot in the good fats, olives and olive oil, extra virgin olive oil. Let's not forget that. And then other bad fats. So animals that have been raised in unhealthy conditions, one of the things that the body does, and whether it's a fish, a chicken, a cow, or a person, is toxins tend to get stored in fat tissue. So when we eat animals that have been raised in poor conditions and fed poor feed, a lot of the toxicity ends up in their fat. So we want to avoid consuming those animals, both from that perspective, and obviously then there's the whole moral humane issue as well. But definitely from a health perspective, if people can't afford or find grass-fed beef, then it's a really good idea when you eat beef to eat leaner cuts, just to stay away from those fats.
Perfect. Now, talking about endurance athletes, why should a runner or a walker training for their first half marathon, full marathon, consider one of these diets?
Well, I mean, for no other reason that when you're eating a whole food diet, whether it's paleo or ketogenic, you're eating a diet that's very nutrient dense, right? One of the challenges, and something that people just often don't realize, is that when we eat a lot of bread, a lot of rice, a lot of pasta, what that ends up happening is you get a lot of calories, but you're not getting a lot of nutrition out of there. If you took that same volume and replaced it with sweet potatoes and kale and broccoli and cauliflower and red lettuce and all that, like the amount of antioxidants and nutrients that you're going to get out of that same volume completely outstrips the nutrition that you get from the grains. So moving away from those grains as the mainstay in the center of your plate means that you're going to just end up getting more of the nutrition and more of the materials that your body needs to build and heal and restore and repair. And we know that endurance athletes, like anybody else, your workout's only as good as your recovery from your last workout, right? So definitely making sure the body has what it needs is really important.
Now, if someone were to actually start off tomorrow with a ketogenic or a paleo diet, in your experience, how long would it take for someone to actually notice a physical change in their body?
You know what? That's a tough question to answer. It depends on the person. If they're coming off a very processed, crummy diet, they could feel a difference within a week. To go to a ketogenic diet cold turkey is very hard. And one thing I'll say is moving into a paleo diet out of a standard American diet, most of the time people will feel amazing in a very short period of time. They will, people have said to me, I feel the fog has lifted. It's not that they're losing weight, but they feel less inflamed. They start to sleep better. They're less anxious. Like there's all these incredible things start to happen. With the ketogenic diet, there's an adaptation period that as the body learns to run on fat instead of sugar, that can actually be pretty unpleasant. People will call it like a carb flu, where I've had, and this can actually happen also with people who are used to eating a lot of sugar. And when they cut that sugar, the sugar has an effect on the brain, just like a drug, right? And so when they come off sugar cold turkey like that, I've had clients who literally felt like they were coming off a drug. Like they stop sleeping, they get anxiety attacks, they get jittery, it's like their brain is screaming for food because it doesn't know where to get its fuel from. And that can last a week, it can last 2 weeks, but then on the other side of that, it's like, the sky's open and everything gets better. One thing I wanted to say, the other thing that's excluded out of the paleo diet in particular is anything that's processed. So processed food. So anything out of a box or a bag for the most part, although there's some better options in that world these days, anything out of a box or a bag typically is excluded.
Very good. So it seems like by introducing any of these, either ketogenic or the paleo diet, that there's a lot more than just performance increase or weight loss, but there are a whole bunch of other things related to mental acuity, related to just other general health that folks are suffering from that get resolved as a result of just changing a simple diet.
Yeah.
Nice. Are there any potential downside risks? You mentioned the carb flu, but is there anything else that folks might be concerned about by adopting either one of these two diets?
So I would say on the paleo diet side, no. I honestly, and especially because, like I said before, the paleo diet, like everything else, operates on a continuum. So there's going to be some people that actually, if they're very, very active, there's so many different things, there's so many different aspects of health status that affect your ability to tolerate one thing or another. And if you're someone who's super, super stressed and who's got issues with your adrenal glands, so your adrenal glands are the glands that produce sex hormones and stress hormones, and if you've been running over pushing for far too long, those guys they start to get exhausted, right? And in that case, you're not going to want to cut your carb intake too low, right? You're going to want to make sure that you're eating a very nutrient-dense diet, but those people might actually benefit from a little bit of rice at night, because rice in the evening can help you to get a better night's sleep. So doesn't mean you're displacing your more nutrient-dense food for the rice, but it means that you may need to introduce a little bit of it. And we tend to like the rice because rice quite often is one of the least damaging to the gut. It presents the least issues. When we introduce grains to babies, very often we start with rice because rice is actually the easiest to tolerate. But I would say for the ketogenic diet in its purest form is not for everybody. Some people just can't handle that amount of fat. Some people just, what we can't ignore is bio-individuality. Mm-hmm. And if you come from 29 generations of people that ate a very high carb, low protein kind of diet, your system might just not be able to tolerate a very high fat diet. So, there's different types of ketogenic diets. We've got a cyclical ketogenic diet where you come in and out of ketosis on a regular basis a couple of times a week. We've got a modified ketogenic diet where, you might actually be quite low carb, but you're not actually producing ketones. So there's supplements now that you can use to help bridge that gap. There's some new exogenous ketone products that have come out on the market. There's things like the superstarch that you use to run that helps the body kind of get a constant state of a little bit of glucose and just helps it to get into fat burning without the person actually being in ketosis themselves. But one thing for sure, and particularly with the ketogenic diet, is you can't expect to go keto overnight and that your performance is going to just be the same the next day as it was 2 weeks before. Because there's an adaptation period that the body has to go through as it relearns to burn fat for fuel, and it becomes more efficient at burning fat for fuel. So it's definitely a process.
So practically speaking, the folks that are watching this video are going to be training for either the Toronto race, which is the October 16th, or the Chicago Marathon, which is October 9th. So that's about 7 weeks away. Is that still an appropriate timeline for folks to get started on this?
I don't know. I think I'd say it's tight. And I'd say that you have to see how you react to it. If you go through those first few weeks and you get through and you're like, oh my God, I feel amazing, then your body's been waiting for you. It's kind of like your body's going, what the heck took you so long, right? For other people, if the adaptation is going to be longer, it might be a better idea to move into a paleo diet, right? Where you're never going to lose by having a more nutrient dense diet, but maybe keeping up the carbs in that paleo sphere, which is the sweet potatoes, the root vegetables, having a little bit more fruit kind of thing. And then maybe using something like the superstarch to kind of see if that can be helpful in amping up your performance. My guess is I think that's how you kind of started, isn't it, Leo? You didn't go.
No, that is exactly right. I took the superstarch for my training runs and then moved into a paleo-ish diet, and now have implemented keto for, I'd say, probably a good 2.5 months now, and it's done wonders for all the things that we just talked about. So if I can be the N=1 experiment, I would highly encourage the ketogenic diet to anyone, especially those who are training for an endurance event. But the paleo is a nice stepping stone to the more, let's call it, extreme ketogenic diet.
For sure. And, if people are interested in reading about this, there's a couple of really good resources out there. I mean, there's more and more every day. But two of the ones that I really like a lot, there's a book that there are two gentlemen, I don't remember the first names, but they kind of go as a pair with their last names, called Phinney and Volek. And I think it's Steve Phinney, and I don't remember what Mr. Volek's last name is, but Phinney is Phinney, and Volek is Volek. And they're both researchers, and possibly one of them is a doctor. And they've done a ton of work on fat burning versus running on glucose. And they wrote two books. One book is called The Art and Science of Low Carb Living. So this is just for Joe Blow, right? And it speaks to the benefits, and they are big proponents of the ketogenic diet. So for them, there's no halfway measure. And it is true that if you don't go low carb enough, you're not going to produce ketones. But if you don't eat enough enough carbs, you're not going to really produce enough sugar. So you're going to kind of leave yourself in what they call the dead zone. in between where you don't have enough of anything to do anything. So it definitely is a process of trial and error for people to find their sweet spot. But then the other book that they wrote, which your audience might actually really enjoy reading, is The Art and Science of Low Carb Performance. And here they've written this really specifically for endurance athletes. So there's a lot of great practical information in there. The only thing I would caution people is a lot of ketogenic diet books and cookbooks put a huge emphasis on dairy and heavy cream and cheeses. And I'm not convinced that that's necessarily the best way to go for many, many people. So you really, as an individual, you have to know that you need to take into account your own circumstances. You need to take into account your own food sensitivities and tolerances before you jump right in to a new plan. People who have missing gallbladders or people with sluggish gallbladders are going to have a much harder time on a ketogenic diet. They can sometimes make up the difference with digestive enzymes, that kind of stuff. But this is something you're going to want to work with some kind of a health professional on to kind of ease you through the bumps, right? The other really great resource is Dr. Tim Noakes. And you spell Noakes, N like November, Oakes. And he's a guy from South Africa who was all about the sugar. He was all about the carbs. And a few years ago, he did a full 180 to the point where people sued him. They were so beside themselves. Like, you can't do this. Like, you cannot possibly say one thing and then say the other. And he's like, you know what? I was wrong. So he's a very interesting guy. He's written some good books. I think he's got a podcast, and he's a great guy to talk to.
That's great, Nathalie. Thank you for these resources. I'll include those in the notes of this site. Now, you mentioned that for folks that really want to get started, reading about it through these resources is a good starting point. If folks want to get a little bit more hands-on help, how might they be able to reach you? I'm pretty easy to reach. You can reach me by email at nniddam@rogers.com. I'm working on a web page, so I don't quite have one yet. But you can also, I've just been too busy somehow. You can also follow me and on Instagram, Nathalie, I guess you'll write out for people in the show notes. But it's NATHALIE NIDDAM like mother. And I've started a page called Keto Nat on Facebook. So it's just new. I throw up some little tidbits of information. I'm definitely in the camp of a Mediterranean skewed modified ketogenic diet. That's where my belief system kind of lies. I think that it's dangerous unless you are of Inuit descent to think that you're going to eat all fat and a little bit of protein and get away with it. I think that in order to get away with that, you have to be willing to eat things like tongues and hearts and kidneys and livers and brains. And most people in our society just don't go there. So you got to be mindful that your body's getting all of the nutrition it needs. Absolutely. Absolutely. Hey, you know what? This is fantastic stuff. Is there anything else that you'd like to add to what you've said so far that might be useful for our audience?
No, I think that, you know what, guys, just listen to your body. And one of the things that Leo said at the beginning, and this happens to a lot of people training for distance runs where they're training for a marathon and they're hoping that they're going to lose weight, and yet they're gaining weight on the other side. And I don't mean like you're getting heavier on the scale and your pants are loose. I mean your pants are getting tight and you're getting heavier on the scale. That means that there's some things up. And it could be your diet, but it could also be stress, right? So know that your body doesn't distinguish between being chased by a lion or being overtraining or working too many hours at work, plus adding training to that or not getting enough sleep. All of those things are stressors. And all of those things will conspire to make that beautiful thing that you're doing not as good for you as it should be. So spend the time, listen to the body, get help if you need it, learn. You want to learn to balance everything. Balance the stress, balance the sleep, the nutrition, and obviously the hydration, which we didn't even talk about, but that could be another day.
Absolutely. Nathalie, I just can't thank you enough for sharing with our audience some tips around ketogenic and paleo diets. Just for your information, Nathalie, I'm going to be using the keto diet between now and the 9th of October. I was going up 50 miles. I'll be doing an ultra on the ketogenic diet. So I'm really looking forward to that and reporting back to folks how that went. Nathalie Niddam, thank you again for all your time and for your input today. Again, for folks that want to reach out to Nathalie for some personal advice, I will leave the contact information in the show notes of this video. Nathalie, thank you again for your time.
Thanks a lot, Leo. Take care. Bye.